Okay, good afternoon and welcome. Let's start the program while in the meantime colleagues are solving some technical issues. My name is László Andor. I'm the Secretary General of FEPS, and FEPS, which is the Foundation for European Progressive Studies, is really a proud host of the discussion today, but also an investor in this project. Together with Friedrich Ebert Stiftung, EU office in Brussels. We really cherish this partnership and believe that it's not only harvest time of the previous season, but also an opportunity to discuss issues which will be useful for considering for our cooperation in the future. At the very start of the meeting, I should highlight that this is not Chatham House rules. So this is going to be a public event inside the room, but also online. So please intervene accordingly in the discussions. I had to mention this because very often when we have meetings here, it is under the Chatham House rules, especially if you don't see a huge audience. Now, even if you don't see a huge audience, there are colleagues online, and indeed there has been a free opportunity to connect with the events, and hopefully there will be a lot of interest in our joint work, not least because before us is indeed a new study, and this is indeed a product of an excellent cooperation. The number of authors, if I counted well, is 9. I thank all the authors of the diverse chapters, and indeed I'm sure that this will be subject of critical discussions. Why? Because the European policy making is at maybe a transition or maybe a turning point. It's very difficult to define at this stage. A new European leadership entered last year. I think our shared assessment of the previous cycle was that it was a very productive one from the point of view of European legislation and European leadership. And I think most of us would be happy with the achievements of colleagues like Brando Benifei, who have been in the vanguard of dealing with the challenges of artificial intelligence, how to ensure that on the one hand, all these innovations serve the productivity of the European economy, and at the same time, all these new solutions are reconciled with the European social models and the requirements which are connected with our shared values in the European Union, especially in the progressive family. Now, why is this stage new? Partly because Europe identified indeed new challenges. Most of this on the economy side have been summed up by the so-called Draghi report, which is a very important connection with technology and innovation, and which I think most of us would agree that holds some of the keys to competitiveness and in industrial policy. And a new industrial policy at this stage is inseparable from the digital sector and the opportunities the digitalization and artificial intelligence provides. At the same time, it's a completely new environment for a competition which is now global competition, and indeed represented by this beautiful design of the new progressive post. I can promote this for you. Everything that comes from the United States of America. Why is it connected with the digital? Because some of the seemingly digital innovators are in the front line of the new American politics, and there is occasionally a tendency to uphold this myth of the Silicon Valley, that a lot of interesting innovation, what is crucial for our life, is originating from there, and the Silicon Valley is also an attraction for many Europeans who want to find their luck as engineers or entrepreneurs in this new sector. At the same time, we should have no doubt that some of these people, starting with Elon Musk, are using their public office for private profit. And they want to use their international influence also to enhance their private profits. And we need to make a lot of clarification in our engagement with the subject to find out, okay, what really contributes to wealth and prosperity and technological innovation, and what is a meddling with geopolitics, which is indeed merging the economic power and the political power originating from the United States in order to extract value from all different parts of the world in all different ways. So from this point of view, we are entering a new era, and obviously the questions of the digitalization will be at the heart of this discussion. I didn't want to say more because it's not for me to elaborate on the subject, but from the point of view of the political framing of the discussion, I thought that this is an important point, and I would like to hand over to the colleagues from Friedrich Ebert Stiftung to guide us through the discussion and chair the meeting.
Thank you very much, Laszlo. And welcome, everybody. Thanks for being here, being interested in the study that we're launching today. Time to build a European digital ecosystem that we produced together with the Foundation for European Progressive Studies and the Friedrich Ebert Foundation, and a great group of experts. Some of them are here in the room. We have a nice agenda of today where we're going to introduce you to some of the chapters in this policy study. Then we have time for some reactions, and we're open up for discussion. Welcome to Gerard. He's my colleague. We manage this project together. I've just introduced everybody to the study, and we're going to open up now for a swift presentation of some of the chapters. Actually, we have a great group of authors. We have Francesca Bria in the first chapter, who's arguing that Europe actually needs and a unified digital industrial policy at the EU level. Francesca will join us in a few minutes online, and she's going to give some insights into her chapter. Then we have Johnny Ryan. He argues that the EU needs proper GDPR enforcement and a whole of Commission approach to solve the issues. He's also going to be with us online. Great, we can see Francesca now on the screen. Then we have Sophie Blumen with us in the room. She's director of the Commons Network. She's giving some into her chapter as well about how a digital public infrastructure could be governed. Then we have Matthias Pfeffer. He's also with us in the room. He's proposing a trustworthy information platform on a European level. Then Levi Sari, he's also with us today. He's arguing that the AI market is way too concentrated and that proper competition is needed. And there are other chapters in the policy study which you can read if you're interested. But I would like now directly hand over to Francesca. I hope it's properly working. It would be great if you could quickly give us an overview of your chapter, about 5 minutes. The floor is yours, Francesca.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, okay, thank you very much. It's great to be, sorry, I'm connected from Berlin. I couldn't be there in person. I also missed your introduction, so I'm not sure. Anyways, I will just be very brief, actually. So I maybe emphasize the importance of this report in this particular time. I think it's very clear that we have a series of challenges when it comes to Europe, its democracy, its integration, and I think it's time that we are very, very serious about how technological infrastructures are key to basically face the vulnerabilities that Europe is, to basically stop the vulnerabilities that Europe is facing at a competitiveness level, industrial competitiveness level, but also security and resilience, and in democracy. So my chapter, let's say my introductory chapter, argues for a comprehensive approach, like what we are defining as a digital industrial policy approach from the European side, that looks at, in an holistic way, at the digital stack, as the technology stack, going from, you know, raw material, energy, water, chips, to the cloud, to artificial intelligence and data, the Internet of Things, like the entire ecosystem and how this is built, and look at where is Europe in the digital space, and what are the actual vulnerabilities, problems, what are the components that we can make in Europe. So let's say I'm advocating for a Make in Europe approach, to be more producers of technology in the key sectors that we in the key industrial sector, from advanced manufacturing to biotech to automotive, and broader, you know, what kind of infrastructure society need to function. And I think it's very clear that 80% of the technologies we use in Europe are imported. They are imported from abroad, so we are fully dependent on big tech companies, in particular US big tech companies, but also obviously the big Chinese companies when it comes to critical raw materials, and also in key sectors like the energy transition. And if you take AI, for example, because you mentioned AI being a place where Europe really needs to step up to be competitive, we have a disruption when it comes to the AI cloud or AI infrastructure that Europe could definitely use. But 70% of the foundational models today are made in the US. So, I mean, it cannot be more timely, our need not only to enforce the regulation that we have, and I'm very worried about what I hear from Brussels in kind of like giving up to enforce the regulation, the DSA, the DMA. I mean, I see that there is a lot of pressure coming from the new Trump administration and big tech, which seems to go MAGA, basically meaning, you know, US first. And I see very little from Europe, you know, basically clearly saying that we're going to enforce our rules, our laws, but at the same time, we are going to build the capabilities and the critical infrastructures that we need here in Europe. Firstly, for the industrial competitiveness, but also for democracy itself, because it is obvious also that you can look at the places where it's harder to build your own capabilities, like advanced AI chips, or, you know, the AI cloud, or even, you know, specific parts of the advanced, you know, Internet of Things and manufacturing. But I think it's obvious that Europe needs, for example, to step up and build an alternative social network or alternative media spaces, because it's impossible. It's very polarized. It is basically used. Online social media are used by the tech oligarchy today to push a very specific or far-right political agenda. So basically, I cannot stress more the point that we need our own industrial capacity. And I mean, in my chapter, I say certain things that we can do at the moment to strengthen that, to strengthen European capabilities. By the way, being firm when it comes to trade issues, when it comes to enforce our regulation, when it comes to enforce competition rules, but also investing much more in industrial policy. And you basically, yeah, I'm gonna publish a big report on the beginning of February on the Euro stack, and the idea that, of course, Europe has a lot of capacity, a lot of companies, a lot of industrial strengths in very different levels of this stack, but we need to change the way we're doing things, which means, you know, using public procurement, which means increasing the investment that we're having on key enabling technologies, and also possibly one, I think, big bottleneck for Europe to act in a faster way is the governance structure, and the possibility to actually, you know, have a governance structure that it's not too slow, that it doesn't need to wait 27 countries to agree on, you know, how to do things. Possibly, I mean, this is one of the key problems that I see: governance, investment, the use of public procurement to enhance and to strengthen, the made in Europe approach. So you buy Europe first approach, for example, which is something we are going to be suggesting in the study, and other measures for each different layer of the technology stack. I mean, I leave it here. I think basically it cannot be more urgent to build up an industrial policy approach for Europe, where we not only regulate and enforce regulation, but also we strongly and decisively invest in the key infrastructures and technologies that we need to build in Europe and made in Europe for industrial competitiveness, for our security, for the resilience of the European continent, and also to protect democracy, because a lot of the democratic, the core of a lot of values that are expressed in our regulations are continuously violated in a very aggressive way, and we risk not only losing the industrial competitiveness side, but also losing the core of what Europe is about, which is a liberal democracy where you have the planet at the center, the workers' rights, and the digital rights of citizens at the center.
Thank you very much, Francesca. If I saw correctly, Johnny Ryan connected. Johnny, can you hear us?
I can hear you, and I'm
Great.
sorry I'm joining late. How long do you want to give me to speak? 5 minutes?
Yeah, 5 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, let me set it out in two halves. Later today or tomorrow morning, it's impossible at this point to say, I'll have an op-ed in The Guardian, and it'll lay out some specific, let's say, immediate steps that are supplemental to what's in the chapter. And I want to brief you about them now, because they support what's in the chapter. First, some background. We've had the events in the United States. The most recent one reported by Bloomberg today, this afternoon, is that Musk may be in the running to purchase TikTok. Now that should connect in your mind to the events in Moldova, a knife-edge election in a candidate country on Europe's border, where the Russian candidate was nearly able to win by using TikTok, and I think also Meta. And I'm not sure how much we were able to do about that. But it should also connect to that incident in Romania, where in the first round, a Russian candidate was able to use TikTok and Meta and almost win that first round of the election, which was then annulled by that country's Supreme Court. So, to set the stakes, it's worth remembering that some of the tech oligarchs who are now servants of the Trump administration, some of them perhaps, but certainly many of the venture capital community that surrounds them, subscribe to the idea that liberal democracy has had its day. And a greater number of them subscribe to the idea that the regulatory state is a problem and should be removed. And when I say liberal democracy has had its day, this is explicit. Some of them want what they call a monarch, a tech monarch. This idea goes back several decades. It's been gathering strength. And the primary intellectual behind them has been pushing the idea of a tech CEO being the monarch who would fix the problems of society and business, and seems to be quite influential on people like Peter Thiel and, to some unknown extent, J.D. Vance, possibly a greater extent, possibly a lesser one. Maybe that's been over-reported. So we have a pincer movement in which Europe is caught. On the one hand, there's the Russian operations, which are having an effect on our elections and on elections on our border. And on the other, we have the tech oligarchs who have become so because we failed to prevent the concentration of power in our digital infrastructure and media from falling into the hands of a few individuals who now must pay deference to Trump. So what I propose, supplemental to what's in the article, as an immediate step, really for Bakunin, Sejourne, and von der Leyen, it falls, I think, among the three, is 3 steps. First, we hear great things about the DSA and have yet to see them. You cannot speak with a Commission official involved in the DSA without hearing the example of TikTok Lite in Spain and how they intervened to avoid that being launched. That's fine as an initial example, but liberal democracy is now in peril. So I think we need to see a completely different pace or else stop talking about the DSA. Either the DSA is going to be a useful tool in our immediate contest for existence, which we may be having, or it isn't. So that's item 1. Item 2, and this is in the article, item 2 is, it is now high time to put pressure, in particular on Dublin, to apply the data rules. The data rules are the fastest, cleanest way to break big tech's manipulation machine. And that is what Europe must do. If it fails to do that, whether through the DSA or through the DMA, then recommendation 3 in this initial reactive emergency period is national authorities across the Union must be prepared to block access to their markets to algorithmic feeds from these platforms. There are ways to do that, for example, under the AVMSD, which has been, I think, overlooked and neglected. But we can see the example in Albania, where they are now blocking all of TikTok for a year. They're blocking it. But now it's going to take them a period of time to technically figure out how to do that. Europe needs an off switch for the manipulation machine, for it to even have a conversation
Clarity, Francesca. Disconnected.
with the people who run it. So I will leave that there. That's supplemental to what's, actually, I won't leave it there. I'll say one final thing. That is supplemental urgent actions that I'll be recommending today in that Guardian op-ed or tomorrow morning. And that builds upon the also urgent, but slightly less urgent need for the Commission to develop a task force to consolidate and make all of these tools across the DGs and across the member state authorities coherent. That task force idea is a way for an EVP or the president herself to have one room where you have chief enforcement officers inside each DG whose job is coherence. And if someone's blocking, then they can have a fight about it in that room with their political master. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much, Johnny. This really shows how timely it is to act now. I will directly hand over to Sophie Blumen, who's sharing a presentation with us. She will also present her chapter on and proposing a commons approach to the digital public infrastructure. You need a minute, or?
Yeah, I'm just looking at. Yes. Hi, everyone. Hi. Nice to be here. Thanks for having me. I'll be giving a complementary perspective to what has already been said, and talking about taking the perspective of a path to sovereignty and focusing on business models and governance. Commons Network, we're based in Amsterdam. We're a think tank and collaboratory working on socio-ecological transition. So yeah, I think it's obvious that Europe has become increasingly dependent on technology provided by a small number of foreign tech companies. I'm really also for its essential infrastructures and public services. We think a lot about the market and how you can have different markets, but if you look at the technology stack and where we're now dependent on for our media, education, health, data infrastructure, and all kinds of sectors, we're increasingly dependent on what is really our essential services on these big tech companies. And this brings into question the level of self-determination and sovereignty of citizens and communities and member states. You can say that these essential services, these basic services, should be considered public because they provide, they should be these shared resources where everybody can use to build on. It should be open, maybe even universally accessible. And how do you organize that? And traditionally, if you look at physical infrastructure, there has always been a role for the public, for the state, to either control or co-govern this in some way or another. Of course, in physical, technical infrastructures are different maybe than the ones like the bridges or roads. They're even more, somebody defines it even as more as shared resources, which we use, and also how we govern them and how we develop them has been very different. But they can be anything from cables to protocols to payment systems to digital identities to media platforms for that is something that public infrastructure is one of the things that is lacking now in order to have this level playing field. When we're dependent on these big platforms or big companies for the basics, how are we ever going to create our own technology stack, right, or our own services? At the same time, we've heard about, Francesca has just also shared about very unconvincingly, we need to invest in a European Eurostack or Eurostack and have industrial policy to that end. We would say we have to watch out as well how we do that. Sovereignty is often understood as, sovereignty is about nation states being able to have strategic autonomy and make decisions, but sovereignty is also about self-determination of citizens being able to take decisions on how they collectively can govern technology, which technology they use. Is their systems interoperable? Is there data portability? How do we move from one technology to the other? So it's also on this community and citizen level that we should think about sovereignty. And there's two things I'd really like to point out, which I think is really important when we think about building this Eurostack. It's about democratic governance and practice, and it's about sustainable business models. So if we don't organize these technologies, whether you talk about media or alternative social media platforms or cloud technology, how do you govern it? What is the role of governance? And then we also don't, and with democratic governance, people think, we talk about representative democracy, we think about the parliament, we think about voting. No, this is about how people shape their direct environment and how we can do that, and if there's an opportunity for that. So it's about governance models. And also, if you invest in these new services that will be able to be part of, that are Europe build, how do you make sure they're not being sold again and they will land outside of our jurisdiction and come into the hands of Elon Musk again? So you have to build and you have to ensure these public values by thinking about the business model, thinking about Is it decentralized? Is it collectively governed? What is the protocol? Is there a protocol that difference can build on? I think the Blue Sky example now is a very good example where there's this effort now to develop the protocol, so there's going to be different services built on the same protocol that can interact with each other, so you're not stuck, because Blue Sky is great, but it's also, I think people here in the room are better informed, it's also venture capital funded, so it could be sold again, right? So we need to make sure we get these business models and this governance right. And then you'll have a fantastic world where you have the strategic economy, you will have economic transition where you can, you can have these different business models. So this is kind of where you want to go. And for that, you need to get these details, I wouldn't say details, you need to get them right. So what can we do? What can governments, what can European policymakers do? We can stimulate these models that are decentralized, collaborative, through a different way, of course, as Johnny clearly pointed out as well. First, we have to regulate and enforce what is already there, so we create also space for these new models, or new models. I mean, they're already there; they need to be built out. You can incubate and innovate. You can deburden public institutions by supporting the transition to, for example, non-Microsoft tools, which are maybe not as convenient, but they're in the end they will be more convenient. It's not going anywhere anymore. Yeah, so you can make use of. So you can also actually, in procurement, you can adopt. You can use these tools as well as a government. Take a good example, or as policymaker, and you can also take part. So you can co-develop. You can have public commons partnerships. Just wanted to leave it with that for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing this with us. I will now hand over to Matthias Pfeffer. He is founder of the Council for European Public Space, and I think he's proposing a very good idea in his chapter, which he will explain to us now.
Hopefully, thank you very much. What has been said so far shows to me very clear that we do not have a problem of knowledge, but we have a problem of political action. Nevertheless, let me take a very short look at our situation before I present my very concrete proposal. The beginning of 2025 proves that we live in a threatening time for democracy. A new powerful coalition of big tech, big money, and right-wing populism declared to attack the values that unite Europe: democracy, fundamental rights, and the rule of law. This coalition is based on a broad agreement on an anti-democratic and anti-human agenda, but also in the manipulation of public opinion that digital technologies allow at an unprecedented degree. In addition, digital technologies enable a concentration of power in the hands of a few globally companies which has already exceeded any measure and is already a problem for democracy now. Europe must react to the current threat. In this situation, I think it's very good that the new Commissioner, Henna Virkkunen, has a portfolio that makes her a heavyweight in the European Commission. It includes tech sovereignty, security, and democracy. I would like to make a very concrete and already elaborated proposal that covers all these 3 points. I suggest to build a TV platform where news and political documentaries from all TV stations licensed in member states will be made available to citizens in all languages. This would be an important step towards the first point, strengthening Europe's digital sovereignty, as it would finally provide a first brickstone of an alternative to TikTok, X, Facebook, and the like. A new European platform where only reliable and trustworthy information can be found. Second, it is a contribution to Europe's security, because Russia is waging a hybrid war against Europe, in which disinformation and the manipulation of citizens through fake news and hate speech aim to weaken Europe and drive it apart. And third, it is an important contribution to democracy, because democracy requires that citizens who make important decisions at elections do so on the basis of verified and reliable information. Only informed decisions are free decisions. In particular, the proposal for a sovereign European TV news platform brings together initiatives to strengthen democracy and promote technology in the field of digital infrastructures and AI applications that promote democracy instead of undermining it further and further. This requires investment. The Draghi report calls for an investment program worth billions to secure competitiveness and prosperity in Europe. According to initial estimates, the proposed news platform will be made possible by only 40 million per year. In view of the 27 billion currently spent on public service media by the citizens in Europe, this is a small contribution towards a major goal: to give all Europeans access to trustworthy information, as it is already guaranteed in Article 11 of the European Charter. This will provide an innovative cross-language information infrastructure that Europe deeply needs. Therefore, the news platform is a low-hanging fruit in times when decisive countermeasures against the attacks on democracy are needed. The new European Democracy Shield aims to combat disinformation. That is well and good, but it's not enough. Instead of only devoting resources to eliminating fake news, trustworthy news must be strengthened and by promoting its dissemination. In addition to fact-checking, we need to strengthen fact-telling. Let's give licensed professional media in Europe a new perspective with a sovereign European platform that allows them to free themselves from the grip of US and Chinese big tech platforms and offer citizens a reliable service across language borders. For the first time, AI-supported automatic translation can create a completely new European public space that can contribute to better mutual understanding in Europe. With it, we would also create a single market for news and information. The European TV platform for news from licensed broadcasters would make a significant contribution to both the required digital infrastructure and the economic prospects of independent media. The project has already been further developed by the Council for European Public Space, which I'm leading, with the support of the European Cultural Foundation in Amsterdam. There's a study by the STOA that affirms the technical feasibility of the platform. A further STOA study on the governance of this platform is underway and will be presented in May in Parliament. There is a working group in the making of parliamentarians from various political groups and the foundations of the center political parties. And there are several EU-funded pilot projects and preparatory actions like EBU's A European Perspective, the independent media platform Display Europe, and the consortium Mosaic, in which first steps are already being taken and relevant results are achieved. Very importantly, the platform is not a competition for Arte or Euronews, or it is not EU TV, as it does not create own content, but only takes over the decentralized programs created by the member broadcasters. And the EBU has developed some important technical tools that are needed for such a platform, but cannot use them because it is not authorized to broadcast itself. I will therefore ask the Commission to propose the creation of such a platform and to include the funding in the annual budget. And I ask you all to support the project by being a member of our working group aiming to authorize the funds in order to realize the platform. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Matthias. And now I would like to hand over to Levi, who's going to present his chapter. He is researcher at the University of Amsterdam.
Yeah, thanks. Can you hear me all right? So, good afternoon. I add to what Marie just said that I have two hats today. I'm researcher at the University of Amsterdam, but also I serve as an EU Policy Fellow for AI Now Institute, which is an AI policy research organization. I'm focused mostly on political economy of AI in Europe and globally, so competition policy, industrial policy, und so weiter. I also have a dark past as a S&D APA, so I was working on a lot of digital regulation before. But there is life after the parliament, I can assure you. So Well, you know. So that's what I try to tell myself at least. So first of all, I would start with general point about competition policy. So my title today is competition policy in large-scale AI markets, especially in Europe. And I think one of the big things we have to do first, before we start talking about this topic, is to ask why do we want the competition in the first place. So there's been very strong tradition in Europe, which I'm sure most of the people in this room are familiar with, to focus on competition as a way to guarantee market efficiency. And that's the way, and that's the rationale for a lot of interventions that competition authorities do to markets, are based on the idea that we are trying to prevent market power, we are trying to facilitate as innovative markets as possible. And I disagree with that statement, because I do think that the role of competition policy is much broader. The role of competition policy is to be part of a broader toolbox in order to achieve ends that we find meaningful. And even though that sounds radical, it is not. That's how we actually started doing competition policy in the early 19th century. That's how, late 19th century, that's how we actually, or in the United States, the Biden administration approached competition policy. And that's how people like Draghi, how people like Benoît Coeur, like different professional competition authorities look at this matter right now. And this is important for progressives, because if we see competition as a tool and not end in itself, we can have much more serious discussion about the shape of the digital ecosystem that we live in. And in that sense, competition policy is something pretty mundane. It's not the end-all be-all, but it's the underlayer for everything that was said before. You know, without competitive markets, or without curtailing corporate power in those markets, the dreams of Sophie, of Matthias, of Francesca, these are not going to happen, because we are living in AI ecosystems which are dominated by few international hyperscalers. So I think also I can expect from this group to also understand that AI is not a thing. There is something else than just the ChatGPT prompt box. There's a whole web of computation, data, talent, distribution networks. And those form an ecosystem which is mostly circled around the interest of the big tech companies from the United States. There are different ways how this happens. Some of them are very tangible tie-ins, but there is also indirect influences. So there are ways through how these big tech companies are able to shape the interest of all the other actors in that ecosystems around their own. And that means that for other actors, the opportunities available are either to become part of those ecosystems or try to find some market niche in which to exist on the sidelines of that ecosystem. But there is not, as we've, I think, repeatedly said during today already, there is not really, we don't have a proper infrastructure on which to build alternative futures. And there are many reasons why that is. A lot of those, for instance, competition policy tools that we have in our disposal are not well fit for this kind of ecosystemic dominance. And there are different technical ways we can approach this. But for instance, I give you an example. Recently, there was a Run AI NVIDIA merger that was cleared by the European Commission, and there was nothing in that merger that, according to traditional competition policy thresholds, would warrant investigation. But there is a very strong point about creeping ecosystemic dominance where NVIDIA gradually becomes the only game in town. And then we end up in a situation where we are right now, where everybody's sitting on their hands and wondering why we are all running on Microsoft. So, in the chapter that I just wrote for this paper, and also the work that we've been doing at ANO Institute earlier, there has been, so our work has been to observe how this evolves. And indeed, what we see is that we have either companies that are somehow entangled with the big tech ecosystems. We all, I guess, are heard about Mistral. It's this French AI company with a deal with Microsoft, and that really just stems from the fact that in order to build scalable, large-scale, customer-facing AI systems, you need access to computation, which is available for by only few international providers in that scale. And that's the problem, for instance, with the EuroHPC program, is that EuroHPC program is about training the models, and this is about using the models. And especially when you try to do that at scale, Euro HPC is not going to help you. There's not going to be apps running on Lumi or Mare Nostrum. But I think that one of the more fundamental things is that also there are alternative paradigms of AI that we should explore. So I think it's becoming painfully obvious for many reasons that the current large-scale AI ecosystem, which has been based on just scaling the computing, is not sustainable. It's not sustainable environmentally. It's not sustainable economically. So there is a need to create space in which other alternatives can emerge, where we can come with more efficient models, where we can actually ask the fundamental question about the ends of technology, and not just saying that we need European open AI, but we should also talk about what kind of AI do we want? What kind of purposes we want to put this AI to? And that would be something else than just slapping like secondary guardrails on existing technologies, but really productively shape the direction of technology. So 3 points, and I see Gerard being very restless with his pen. So increasing competition is not enough. We don't just want more competition. That's not something that we should stake our hopes to. We should see competition as a defensive regulatory action which keeps space open for all the other things that were mentioned in the report. But it is still crucially important. It's crucially important because if we don't do this, if we don't enforce the competition policy tools that we have, or develop alternative theories of harm, for instance, we are going to end up in a situation where a lot of this will be de facto impossible. And then I have all sorts of concrete proposals, but I think I'll stop it here. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Levi. So my name is Geert Oostwijk. I was already mentioned. Sorry to be late. I was stuck in another meeting. I'm the digital policy analyst at FEPS, and I will moderate now a bit of the discussion. And the reason why I was a bit restless because we are running over time. But I think this is also, and you can imagine, we only had not even all the authors of our study, so we have even more chapters in this study covering the most important strategic topics. And I think right now it was already very inspiring, and a lot of maybe questions also from the audience, so we want to take time for that. But to also kick off the discussion, we have several first reactions that we get. So I will announce them one by one, not to go over them now, but like to give them the floor first. And the first in line is Cecilia Ricap. You are head of research and associate professor in economics at the UCL Institute for Innovation and Public Purpose. I know that you also have a recent paper out on digital sovereignty, so I think this very much relates. So I want to give you the floor to maybe react and maybe pick up some of the things that you find interesting, or also maybe something that you have been pushing for yourself.
Turn on. Okay, yeah. Perfect. Thanks, Gerard, and thanks, everyone. Really, I think, well, you don't need me to say that this couldn't be timelier. And I think that I will go straight to try to, like, summarize and pick up a bit of what you have all been saying, because it really resonates with the report that, together with Eda Milson and other colleagues, we have just published, that it's precisely called Reclaiming Digital Sovereignty. And I think I want to start with Matthias and what he, and further unpacking my take on what you were saying about knowledge, and that it's not a matter of Europe lacking knowledge. And actually, all my research has shown that Europe, not only Europe, but I emphasize here Europe, develops tons of knowledge and innovation. That's not the reason why Europe is lagging in terms of competitiveness. Actually, what Europe is doing is producing a lot of knowledge and innovation that ends up further favoring a few companies, notably US big tech, and also secondarily companies from China. So basically, this is not a problem about producing more knowledge, but it's a problem of how that knowledge that is produced in Europe then does not translate not only into economic profits in Europe, but also into social benefits for everyone in Europe and beyond. And at the level of the concentration of this stack or this value chain and digital technologies more broadly, there is another thing to emphasize, and this goes to what Levi was saying in terms of, for instance, Mistral and many other companies that are producing frontier digital services of different types But it's not only a matter of not having a place to train them, that they then go and train these models and different services on big tech clouds. The cloud is not just a place to train models. It's basically, I started calling it the supermarket for digital technologies. Whatever you want, you can go and buy it there. But it's different to typical supermarkets because digital services are produced there, they are purchased there, and then they are consumed there. You never leave. So basically, even if Europe thinks about AI factories where these models can be trained, where are these companies going to afterwards sell the models? And this goes back to what Sophie is saying and the importance of digital public services. And why, and on top of all the reasons that she gave, which I fully agree with, I want to say one or two more things, considering my background as an economist. Many layers of the stack are prone to natural monopolization, which basically means that concentration is more efficient than decentralization. So it's not that I'm against competition, it's just that economically speaking, it makes more sense to have only one provider. And this cannot be left out in the market, because even if we try to push for competition, eventually the market will be concentrated. And especially considering the relevance of media for society at large, the relevance of having the truly material infrastructural layer of the stack, of having this supermarket of technologies as a public solution in order to create competition in the different layers, to spur innovation, but innovation that is good for the people. And I go here back to Levi and try to grab up as fast as I can, that I fully agree with this question. We don't want to simply catch up with the US or China. That's not what we should be doing. It's a different type of frontier technological development, where we ask technology for whom, for what, where we put people and the planet up front, and I know that Adam Milson will comment more on that, but just to close, I think that I also want to emphasize for this vision of the Eurostack, Francesca was mentioning it, procurement, the power of the buyer. When we think about all these solutions, we need demand. We should never forget about demand. We foster supply and we create these layers of the stack. Who's going to consume all this? The state. The state at its, not only the central administrations, the schools, universities, the defense sector, hospitals, you name it. So if we leverage on that, this will be an incentive for European companies, and also I'm Argentinian on top of Italian, but also for companies from around the world to participate in this stack. And just really final word, we were speaking, and Johnny was speaking a lot about the challenges, how these companies and Trump and not only Russia, also China, are hijacking democracy in this collusion between their states or governments actually and big corporations. And to battle against this, there is one priority and crucial area, which is the ecological breakdown. And in this area, big tech companies are already trying to become also the rulers. It's not just that they consume a lot of energy. They are also offering their digital services and trying to showcase the twin transition as their transition, the ones that they will lead and that they will define. So I leave everyone with that. Thanks a lot for writing the report. A pleasure reading it and looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Cecilia. This is a great start off of the discussion. We have your colleague with you. You said as well, okay, you are co-authoring this study that will also be presented this afternoon at another meeting. Adam Milson Parana, you're associate professor at the LUT University. Is it in Finland? Is it correct?
Finland,
Finland.
Indeed.
So we have a lot of Finnish connections also. The work at FEPS, it's one of the champions, I think, in Europe on digital.
Okay, amazing. Although I'm also connecting with Finland, I'm in fact Brazilian. Italy Brazilian, and I'm really happy to be here. Thanks for having us for this amazing discussion. I mean, it's very difficult to talk after all of you, and particularly from a great colleague. We are working together for so many time. I mean, Cecilia, and of course, I fully agree on everything we say here, but I would like only to highlight maybe some key takeaways stemming from these two documents that I think should be something practical, at least for us to focus on. And I've been currently working on advancing what we have called a critical political economy of green digital transition. There is this need of thinking in a more coherent, internally coherent manner, these two aspects. the environmental and digital issues in a more integrated manner. Also, horizontally integrated beyond these two aspects, regulation, competition, industrial policy, and active, I'm highlighting these active state capacity building on these two topics. And I think these two documents are pretty much doing that in a very same direction, which is amazing to see. I think these are good first step in this direction, although we can always do more. And I think a green digital transition is in fact materializing, but it's in a very dark way, and the opposite of what we need. And I think what these documents are bringing through from a progressive standpoint is advancing this by touching very loudly on the labor and environmental aspects. And this is what we are in our document are especially concerned on doing when we call it for a digital stack for the people and the planet. And this focus on labor and environmental resource consumption, it's a strategic departure point from a progressive perspective, no matter how we want to depict it, either politically or economically. And I would like to just to stress on this latter point, the environmental one, because I think we badly need it. This is not exactly the place for that for the sake of time, but I will bring you some figures here that I think are very sound. For example, the ice water consumption projected to reach 6.6 billion cubic meters by 2027, which is the equivalent of half of the UK, is not a small country I'm talking about, UK's annual consumption of water. We can do more on tackling these issues on an integrated manner because this is really urgent topic. For example, to generate a 1,000 word prompt response on ChatGPT-4, we consume the equivalent of a 500 milliliters bottle of water just for 1,000. I mean, to one prompt of ChatGPT. It's a lot. How many bottles of water you consume every day, and how many of 1,000 words of GPT responses do you get? So this is really something. And one might think that this is a problem for Latin American countries such as Chile struggling with data centers, or Argentina, or Asia and Africa, but turns out no. It's happening in Finland, it's happening in Sweden, it's happening in Spain. So it's pretty much also, if it was not enough to think it globally in an interconnected manner, and pretty much an European problem. And because this is so much, as we have been discussing, concentrating on a few companies, we have another problem, which is a transparency and accountability on these issues. We simply don't have the data. And this is one reason more we badly needed a public-oriented, a public-leaning digital stack so we can have access to this data, to this information beyond regulation, but actually orienting policy and actively taking measures within these issues. So that's why we need to foster not only regulation but public action. Well, this would be enough to justify, as we all agree, strong and efficient regulation, but we should go further. We should, as I've been repeating at this point, a public-led, public-oriented infrastructural approach to that. That's what it meaning to properly connect the environmental and digital aspect through infrastructural approach, infrastructural understanding, and the side of well, researching, explaining, and critiquing these problems, but also advancing solutions for them. And this, I think, is pretty much the approach these two documents share, and I think it's one of methodologically, but not only one of the main takeaways of these. And importantly, through a digital stack, as we call it, for the people and the planet aligned, again, inseparably, these two sides. And this is why a progressive digital sovereignty approach is also necessary, because it's not possible to do it without sovereign tech. without sovereignty approach for this. So this combination, this I close it here. This combination of regulation and rulemaking, enforcement, industrial policy, and actual development of strategic infrastructural part of this complex, this stack, is very much important, and I think I think it's the main topic that we should have with us, stemming from these two documents in an online manner. Thanks for again for having us here for this debate.
Thank you, Remilson. This is a very interesting take, and I think it resonates very much with our work, but it also stresses some extra points. So we are here today also with somebody from the Commission. I think I can still say, Paul, you're still also a special advisor also at the Commission at the DG Justice and Consumers. Of course, a very big legacy as well when it comes to the GDPR and your role you've played there. So very knowledgeable in the field. I think it's good to mention here as well, like you're from the Commission. We will go later today to the European Parliament to talk with lawmakers there to really have the interaction with the people that should be working on this and decide on this. But maybe it's good for you to give a bit your view, and I guess it's more personal than maybe on behalf of the Commission, but still with your experience within the Commission, how do you take on all of this huge challenge?
Well, thank you very much for this document. I think what distinguishes this document is its holistic approach. I think it is very rare that we have in the same room people who work on competition policy, on data protection, on media policy, on the commons, on AI tech policy, on sustainability issues. But I think this is a fantastic document. I must really congratulate FEPS and the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung, because in my view, it's really one of the first documents, let's say, in the Brussels scene, which in such a comprehensive manner brings together all the policies which need to be brought together and which need to be coherent. And so I think in this document, you are giving a spirit of pushing the desks together. You know, yesterday evening I was at an event on how to fight organized crime, and there the Commission says, yeah, let's push the desks together of the tax administrations, the tax people, the public prosecutors, the crime, the police. They have to have the secret services. They have to push their desks together and work in an integrated way. And I think your document challenges the Commission to do the same across these different policy areas which you address here. And as some of you have mentioned, the new portfolio attribution to Vice President Virkkunen is, of course, revolutionary if you compare it with national governments. I mean, there's no minister anywhere in the world which has democracy, technology, and security together. What do you see from this? You see that the Commission is a learning institution. I think the Commission in this portfolio attribution has recognized the strong nexus between technology, democracy, and security, and all the other issues which you address here in this document. And the challenge now is, in the Commission, to give life to this promise of this portfolio title of Vice President Virkkunen. There are, of course, other commissioners involved, but I think her portfolio attribution is symbolic for what is needed. And so I would say your document is must read for all who think that it's not just a coincidence that we have an executive vice president on democracy, technology, and security, but it has a meaning. And this is a first contribution, a very important contribution, I would say, to operationalizing this. Let me make two remarks on enforcement and two remarks on future policy making. First, enforcement, as far as it lies in the hands of the Commission and national authorities, of course, always has a discretionary angle. There is an ample jurisprudence which, for example, says that the Commission can never be forced to bring an infringement procedure. The Commission has complete political discretion in infringement procedures against states. This may be different in the area of AI. How far does the Commission discretion go when enforcing the AI Act? How far does it go on the DSA? All these questions have not been tested. I think they will be tested, and the Commission will be held accountable both politically and legally. And I think if you want to add strength to the work, the next step of this type of work is to produce documents which encourage judges to give the type of answer you think the law makes possible and you think serves the purpose of more coherence and stronger enforcement. Because, you know, my bet is it's not enough to call for more enforcement. The question is, it's a legal question, you know, how much can the Commission be forced legally to enforce, or is this all discretionary? So this is my first remark, and the second remark on enforcement is that the same applies, of course, in the member states. And honestly, we will only find out if test cases are launched. And so if this group expands its network and works together with NGOs and legal persons of public interest, which are able to bring test cases, like Max Schrems has been doing it very successfully and very usefully in the area of GDPR, if we create a culture, maybe starting from this table, from FEPS and FES, also in other areas to have such test cases and have public interest organizations to do this, this is good for EU law, it is good for the rule of law, and it is good for democracy, but it needs to be organized. So, you know, this is, I would say, you know, already quite a concrete paper, but the nitty-gritty goes much deeper. And you all know this, the experts on competition are here in the room. And so, okay, so this is about the enforcement side. On the policy-making side, I would say generally there's a huge soul-searching in the Commission, you know, what to do now and what are the next steps on defense of democracy. I think everybody is aware of the drama. And so input ideas are welcome. I mentioned also the Fair Processing Act. Consumer protection is not a chapter here. This is missing. I think it should be part of the you know, greater coherence exercise and of the toolbox which you look it into. And I would say also the merging of the use of money, which traditionally in the budget of the EU has been serving for economic purposes, for the markets, for agricultural policy, you know, that's the history of the European Union, and the merging of money into democracy purposes, into rule of law purposes. I think that type of discourse you need to foster, and already the defense of democracy package will be a first opportunity, because one question will be very simple. Is this just words, or will be money put behind defense of democracy? Will there be investments, new plans for spending money on democracy? And in the next financial period, we are now starting to work on the next financial period, how much money are we shifting to this area? You know, to take the example of this TV platform, so not a station, I understood, but platform, well, it needs money. It's not a lot, but it needs money. And, well, I mean, if you look at the idea of a Eurostack, even more. So I would say here on that angle, the next step of this work, if you want to concretize this more, is, for example, what would an operationalization of the great ideas you have here mean in the next financial period, concretely, in terms of money allocations, and how satisfied are we actually with the public interest effect of EU funding, Horizon, Europe, and so on in the last mandate? If I may end with a personal note, I come from a DG which has a very small budget, DG Justice, and you know, we are more lawmakers and rule makers than spenders. But I have heard from a lot of quarters, and this must be a concern in the Commission for those who are responsible for spending, that a lot of spending of money which goes to the market, you know, to SMEs and to research, it's spent and nothing happens. I mean, yes, the project is implemented, it's all fine, you know, financial control, okay, but public value, unclear. This area needs also this type of input. And so I would encourage you, in addition to consumer protection, in addition to going deeper on enforcement issues, also to look at that area. For the benefit of the European Commission, I'm sure, you know, the Commission will read this very carefully in many quarters, but also, of course, for the benefit of people in Europe and public interest. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for bringing this in. And insights also in the internal workings and the to-do list that you just gave us to do further research. And about consumer protection, it's maybe good to have a bilateral talk about how we can include that, because in the end it's also what's in it for the European citizens, because it's very far away, and I think that's where you get to a point that you can get support behind certain initiatives. They see not only banning, because that was mentioned before, and an off switch, it's very negative perhaps, because then they lose some. What do you give back? And I think that's interesting. So we have literally 5 minutes on the official time to do some interaction with all of you. I think I can make it a little bit longer, not to go over the time too much, but I want to open the floor to others maybe that want to come in with questions or reactions, or from your side. Yeah, I see already the first one. There you go.
Hi, Mark Dempsey from Article 19. Firstly, thank you very much for hosting this and some of the excellent inputs and presentations. And Paul, those comments were really helpful in terms of thinking how to move forward. My question is, there's been a lot of talk on the Eurostack, and we're still at a relatively superficial stage, but my question is really, to what extent is it plausible? So firstly, from the funding side of the EU, but then there's also the member states. When you have US tech companies so embedded in the lives of public citizens, and not only embedded, but employing and partnering with universities, employing thousands of people, and I speak coming from Ireland, the political ramifications of trying to disentangle from that dominance are huge. So I think there's that whole angle that needs to be considered. If Europe, i.e. Brussels and the institutions, are really going to consider what a Eurostack means and get an agreement from the 27 member states, that in itself is a massive question.
Yeah, and maybe also like how to finance it is another question. I know that the digital service tax is a file that I used to work on in a previous position. Didn't make it also because of Ireland, of course, doesn't want to tax the tech giants. Maybe it's another discussion this time around. But I think the question is as well, like in all of this, is it unanimity or will there be other decisions maybe taken, especially if it's in a bit broader context of the MFF? There's a lot of traders, a lot of things, but I don't know which of the speakers would want to come in and react on this. It's a very specific question. Maybe Francesca would be the most, but I don't think she's still online now. She's no longer there. Cecilia, you want to come in? Sophie, maybe you both can do, and then if others want to signal to me that they want to take the floor, but maybe start with Sophie and then to Cecilia.
Thanks. Yeah, it's a very good question. I think it also depends on what level of the stack we're talking about, and some of them will be harder than others. But I think I can speak to if you think about cloud technology and software used in governments and used in universities. That's somewhere where there is coordinated action, right? I mean, like we just talked about the example before of Munich, where they were a pioneer in trying to kind of undo themselves from Microsoft, and then, well, there was different reasons for why it didn't work out there particularly, but they were only doing it. They were doing it alone. If all German cities would have done it at the same time, let alone if all European cities would have done it at the same time, it would be a very different landscape. Because indeed, there needs to be massive investment, right? Also to make these technologies as convenient. I know, and from my experience working in the Netherlands closely with both municipality of Amsterdam and also the government, there is now really an interest in doing that, and Amsterdam is looking at how to become digital independent. The Association of Municipalities is also looking at how can we become, writing a report, like how can we become digital independent? What does it mean? That's coordination. That's all the municipalities in the Netherlands.
Cecilia?
Well, actually, my answer was going to be pretty much in line with what Sophie said, which is that basically the way I see it is, as I was saying before, the power of the buyer. The state will buy. So we cannot force European or other companies to like decouple from Amazon, Microsoft, or Google. We cannot force European citizens to do it, but the state can decide that it's not going to procure from these companies, and that it's not going to procure from even from European startups that offer the services through big tech clouds. And if they want to offer the service to the state, they need to do it through the public-led cloud. So I think that's the way in which you create it. So it's still, the companies will still be there, and there will still be a lot of work to be made in terms of all the things that Paul was mentioning regarding enforcement, and what Gerard was saying in terms of taxing these companies, their income, starting again the conversation about a digital tax service. I was mentioning earlier this morning at DG Competition, in Argentina, for instance, there was a time, now it's lower, where the tax that was charged to companies that were exporting crops, in particular soybean, was 30% of the value of the exports. 33%. Why? Because the government agreed that these companies were making more profits because of the fertility of the land in Argentina. Big tech companies are profiting from the data and the knowledge that is produced in Europe. So there is a space to say that this is also part of the richness of this region, and there is a space to levy a tax on that. So it will be expensive. We cannot prevent the private sector from continuing doing business as usual, but there is a space to create a public-led stack for people and the planet if we leverage more on procurement, the power of the buyer.
Oh, you want to come in?
If I may say something, I think there is a misconception here in the room, in the sentence where you just said, we cannot decouple the companies in Europe from Amazon and other cloud providers, but we have to use procurement law. I think the misconception is that procurement law also is highly legalized, and of course the buying of the state falls also under WTO rules. So I think, you know, it is a little bit too simplistic and would require more work if you are basically saying a let's buy Europe policy, which excludes from procurement other providers from outside Europe, which are benefiting from WTO rights, or which have subsidiaries in Europe and therefore are European providers, can just be excluded. A different matter is, of course, that you define in the public procurement tenders the technical specifications in such a way that they are commons specifications and not closed systems. So I think, you know, honestly, this needs more work. I would like to say something on the other front, namely the cloud. Well, you know, if we take GDPR serious, and if our enforcement authorities would be held and encouraged by the Commission to go for the big players, which I think would be a natural inclinations of DPAs, because their duty is to protect citizens, so they should go for the companies which process most data of citizens, one will come to, let's say, a natural preference for cloud providers which are fully, really certainly complying. And you know, the question is this existing in the European market? And also you would come to the conclusion that many exports of data outside Europe are illegal. Even the Commission has been certified by the European Data Protection Supervisor that its contracts with Microsoft are actually not in line with GDPR because data is exported. Yeah? So I would say harder enforcement, you know, and there I'm a little bit with Johnny Ryan, harder enforcement of GDPR will bring a lot of benefits to cloud providers and tech providers, processors in Europe, if this harder enforcement comes about, and you know we have an issue here, and if politics encourages the harder enforcement by doing the opposite from what it does today. If today a DPA enforces hard, politics comes and says, lobbied of course by big tech, we have to reduce your staff, you know, like it happened in Denmark. Yeah, we don't have the money anymore for enforcement. And of course, this political family maybe stands for encouraging parliaments and DPAs to do harder enforcement and also to resource the enforcement better. And the effect of this will be that the opportunities for those who provide services which are fully in line with GDPR are bigger, and I think many of the American services are not in line with GDPR, but they take big parts of the market because there's no enforcement.
Is there anyone else that wants to have the floor? I see there in the end.
Yeah, just very briefly, I mean, we always return to these questions of taxation and the tax base, but I think one point that's worth underlining, is that these companies already have taxation systems in place, right? When you use a browser, your browser is financed by a privatized tax on search. You know, Google pays $20 billion a year to Apple just for that, and that's just to Apple. It's not even the whole thing. On advertising, there's a 50 to 80% tax that's imposed by the ad network on you know, ad selection. We have the same thing in app stores. It's like a 15 to 30% privatized tax on these things. Every single time, these systems work only because there's concentrated power, and this is power that we have, you know, in many cases, the tools to break. And so if instead of trying to impose new taxes, we simply, quote unquote, but like, you know, it's workable, I think, try to seize the taxes that are being perceived for private purposes and use them for public purposes instead, I think we would have a lot of money to work with. And I think, you know, based on the DMA and based on the number of existing tools, we could actually work in that direction. There's a lot of money in tech. I don't know if people have noticed. And, you know, if you look at, you know, just to return to that one example of browsers and search, if you look at the amount of money that is being deployed from search to finance browsers, most of that money does not actually go to browser development. If you put it in the hands of a publicly minded organization, then that could be reinvested. And then you don't need to go through this all like, oh, you know, who's going to tax whom? Is the member state going to actually redeploy that in the way we want or just spend it on something stupid? You know, you can keep it in the digital ecosystem, but put it towards public-minded goals. And I really think we have the basics to start doing that. We just need to take the money where it is.
I like that as a final thing. So if there's nobody else, I would go to Tobias Merschel. I see that there's a lot of comments also online, and I skimmed through them, but there's mostly reactions and comments. And I want to say also to the audience online that's been quite active, I see in our stream, that we will keep them, and also the comments, we will take them on board also in the future work that we are going to do. But to close the session, we have with us Tobias Merschel. You are the director of the FES EU office. So I want to give you the floor to close the session.
Thanks a lot, and thanks a lot to the whole team of FABs for the good cooperation and for, well, doing the study. I want to thank all the authors we are having here in the room and also in the virtual room. Also you for coming for discussing this study. It's called Time to Build Up a European Digital Ecosystem. Yeah, it's high time, I would say, and it's the right time to discuss it. So I'm really happy that at the beginning of the new commission we are discussing this paper, and as Paul put it, it's a must read. So we have it also printed. We don't print everything, but I think that's really worth printing. Even it's dealing with digital stuff, it's from time to time it's really worth having also a hard copy to study. So I really do recommend, as Paul did and also the other authors, I'm recommending reading it. And well, as we are running out of time, I will be very, very brief with my closing remarks. As we have said, well, it's very important that we are dealing with this topic in this very particular time. We are heading forward, and we need to have responses on what's coming up, and therefore also the subtitle is Recommendation for the EU's Digital Policy, and that's what is really needed. The first steps, the next steps we are going to do. Well, we have heard we have to enforce the regulation we do have, how important it is that the data rules have to be applied, so we have to take really what we have and start with that, and then we have to go on. And what the next steps are, we have spoken about that, and as also Matthias said it, we have no problem of knowledge, we have this problem of political action, and Europe must not just react, Europe must act, and that is important, that we act and not just react what's going on. And as it has been said, well, we need a European digital industrial policy, I would say, and also we have to define what is a progressive European industrial policy, because that's really important, that not to forget the progressive part in the digital industrial policy, because, well, we need to drive innovation, and this digital industrial policy and secure European values, and in the end also to secure our liberal democracy, because in the end it's all about democracy. All the stuff we are discussing today, it's about, well, ensure saving our democracy. And maybe it sounds a little bit too I'm giving too much alert, but I think we have really to be very, very cautious. It's going to happen so much in the next time. So we have to defend our democracy, and therefore it's really important that we working on these topics. We haven't planned yet what we're going to be the next step. Well, the next step is going to be a presentation in the S&D group this afternoon. Then I invite you to share this paper. We're going to work on this topic also in the future. I think this discussion was very, very fruitful. I want to thank you all for participating, for coming, and hope to see you soon again here in the room of FEPS, or also FES, or in this place in Brussels. So thanks all for coming. Have a good afternoon, and see you soon. Bye-bye.
Can I maybe also, for the people online and also here in the room, I think it was also mentioned that the next step is also part of a network. So you were invited to join here today, and there will be follow-ups. And I think also the praise that I heard as well from Paul Nemetz and also from you, Tobias, that it's a must-read. It doesn't come out of the blue sky. It's a work, it's a network. It's the network that we have of the great authors that are here, the extra speakers that came also from abroad to be here today. So please be in touch. I think for both me and Marie, our email addresses are on the website. If you want to work with us, if you have great ideas, you can always reach out, and we are an open house in that sense. So thank you.